Last time we set up our input channels. We got all of them configured and named. We got them placed on the layers of our board. Now we're going to set up our output channels. For this demonstration, we're going to have 6 stereo aux sends for monitors, and we're going to have 5 stereo aux sends for our broadcast. Those are going to be summed to a matrix so that we can send that out and have a little bit more control in the background over the dynamic range of our groups for our broadcast. We're also going to use our 1 remaining aux send as a monitor wedge on stage. Hey, if we haven't met yet, my name is James and I help worship leaders, sound techs, and church tech directors eliminate the mystery and frustration of running sound at church. So if you want to do a great job and want to have fun doing it, you found the right place. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button and welcome to the club of Sound Ninjas. The first thing we're going to do is go to our setup page. And instead of mixer stereo or mixed stereo selection, first we're going to go to bus configuration. This allows us to choose how many groups or buses that we want. And it's got a total 12. You can't get more out of it than this, but it's fine. We're going to go our number of auxes or aux sends, and we're going to bump that up to 12. That means we're going to have 0 groups. I'll show you how the groups work in another one, but I like the way that aux sends give you more flexibility of what's sent to it as the levels go rather than groups. So for right now, we're going to do that and hit apply. And yes, we want to proceed. I'm glad they asked you before you wipe stuff out. And now we can go to our mix stereo selection. So all of our mixes, except for the last one, we want to be stereo. So aux 12, we're going to have for our monitor send for the mono wedge on stage. Everything else, we're going to select stereo. Now we hit apply. And it should be good to go. Now that we have our mixes configured, we can go to our iPad and name them. It's a lot easier to name on the iPad. You can do it here, but right here we can go to mix, and then from there we can say which mixes we want and how we're going to name them. So right now we have they're named monitor, which that's fine. Monitor 1, 2, 3, 4. This one was named previously subs, which makes sense. Sometimes you want to have a subwoofer on an aux send. We're not going to do that right now though. So subs, we're going to change the name back to monitor 5, and we're going to keep it light blue. And then we're going to do monitor 6 as well. All right, so all 6 of our monitors are now labeled. If you wanted to, you could label them with whose monitor that's going to be. If it's going to be the drums, a singer, the bass, whichever one, you could go ahead and label that if it's going to be consistent from week to week at your church. Now on our aux 7, we're actually going to set these up for our broadcast mix. So I'm going to name it drums and make it green. The next one is going to be our instruments. Also green. Next is vocals. I abbreviate it Vox. We're going to make that green. And then we have our speaking mics, and we're going to have that green as well. So these 4 groups then are going to get summed down to a matrix for our broadcast, and I'll show you more about that a little bit later. Oh, there's one more group that I want to make, and I want to make one for our crowd mics. And this is for the broadcast as well. Now, aux 12, remember, this is our mono aux. We're going to call this wedge, and maybe we'll make this pink so that it's a little bit different. Now that we've got all of these named, now we can pull them down and put them on a layer on our control surface. So we've used layer A and B. If you didn't watch that video, I'll link down to it in the description below. Where we've set up most of our instruments, and we've got our key channels that we're going to keep on our top layer here. And then our vocals with DCAs and our effects returns, so we can mostly live on this layer while we're running the service. Now on layer C, I've already added the crowd mics because I wanted to make sure that we had a place for all of our input channels on the control surface so that we can get to them easily. So on D, we've already got some of our monitors set up. We can see that monitors 1 through 6 are here, drums and instruments are on here, but the rest are not. So if you'll remember, we go back to our setup and then surface, and we're on layer D right now. If it wasn't, we could select it here. And then on the top right, we're going to go to our mixes. So our mixes, we're also going to line this up and pull down our vocal mics, our speaking mics, and our crowd mics, and our monitor wedge. all of our outputs are here as well. Now, you'll also notice that we have our effects sends. This is what we're going to be using of the output that's going to the rack for our effects, for reverb, delay, chorus, whatever effect you want to use. This is going to be the send master that's here. You can see back here on layer B, we have the returns. This is what's coming back from the rack. But down on layer D, we have the effects sends. We can use this to make sure that we've got the right level going to the effects master. And there's some other stuff that we might be able to do on here as well. It shows what effect is on there and how you can get to it there with the effects sends. So now that we've set up our buses and our outputs, we're going to make sure that they're all clean. Right, we can see here that on some of the monitor mixes, there's already some EQs, there's some graphic EQ, and there's not a compressor on yet, but it's there. So for our monitors, we're actually going to go ahead and flatten out the graphic EQ on here. So we could just turn it off. I don't think they have it put it on the faders on the SQ5. I could be mistaken. But we can take all of these and put them back up to 0 if we want to keep them, or we can just leave it bypassed and turn it off. That's my preference. And on here, we're going to go ahead and turn off that high pass filter and return this gain back to 0 dB. We want to have everything flat for our EQ going to the monitors before we start. We don't want to add coloration on there that changes the way that they hear themselves. So we can copy all of these over. If we go to our library and we want to recall a flat EQ, we can go to user, and earlier I saved a user preset that's a flat EQ. I think it's easier to reset than trying to get all the gain knobs exactly where they think they should go each time. So I'm going to recall the flat EQ on all of these. So I'm going to hit library and recall all these. That's already flat. That was for a subwoofer. That would not sound good if that was somebody's monitor mix. And there we go. So everything is now flat. Now on the monitor wedge, you might want to use this graphic EQ to notch out some feedback. That would be a good thing. My preference usually is to use our parametric EQ, but you can use graphic if you'd like. This graphic EQ is a constant Q graphic EQ. So it shapes the filters a little bit easier than if it's an actual analog graphic EQ. Those can be a little bit trashy sounding or very bumpy in their frequency response if you're pulling down a lot. So that can be a good thing. Just make sure that it's in if you're trying to use it so that you don't fool yourself and have that phantom knob turn that does nothing. Now we can set up each of these monitor mixes and the way that they're sent, right? So for our aux send settings, we can go and choose whether it's post preamp, so there's no channel processing, post insert return, which we can show you where the insert is on our input channels. We go over here to our kick drum for fun, and we can go to the processing page. You see that the insert comes before the EQ, but after the gate and the high pass filter. So our option there on where we're setting up our aux send, it could be post insert return, which would mean pre-EQ. We could have it post parametric EQ or post delay, meaning all the channel processing, including any timing that you might be adjusting for, but you're probably not adjusting for timing. So post parametric EQ would be, I think, before the compressor, but I'll verify on screen for you. And then post delay would be all of your processing. So for our monitor mixes, we definitely want to be at least post insert return. Everybody needs to be hearing the high pass filter on their channel, in my opinion. The high pass filter helps clear up any extra mud. We're not trying to make things sound too thin with the high pass filter. We want it to sound just right, and it will clean up their mix a whole lot if you use post high pass filter, which on this means post insert return. We can also change whether they're pre or post fader regardless of what the pickoff point is. So the channel source could be post fader, but still post preamp. So there's a lot of different options here, but we want all of them on this to be all pre-fader. If we hit all post, that would mean that any mix adjustments that we make for front of house are also reflected in the monitors. So if somebody can't hear themselves because we've tucked them back in the mix out here, then they're going to sound worse because they can't hear themselves. So then we're going to have to tuck them back in the mix even more, and then they can't hear themselves even more, and they sound worse. So we want all of our monitor mixes to be pre-fader. We don't want the changes that we're applying at front of house going to their monitor mix. We could also assign all channels to be on or off. If we assign them off, it's as if we mute that channel going to that aux send. So that if we wanted to only unmute the things that we wanted, that might be a good option to just wipe it clean and only send to that aux send what you want. On the flip side, if you want to go ahead and turn all of them on, you can do all on. So all on or all off, they're all assigned to that aux send, regardless of whether they're turned up or not. Now, if we want to start assigning channels to the aux send, we can use these buttons over here. Usually the mix select button is going to be on this, the LR bus. And if we have our input channels here and we've got the LR bus, that means that any changes that we make on the faders here are going to be what's going to our main output. We can, though, select a different mix. So if we select mix 1, now we're seeing the levels demonstrated on the faders that are going to this first monitor mix. And you can see them changing throughout. And we've got different monitor mixes. Each one of those is separate, so nobody has to share the same monitor mix. They can have control over each one of those individually. Now, if you want to get back to the left-right bus, you can tap this button again. So we're on mix 1. We tap it one more time and it goes back to the left-right bus. You always want to go right back to the left-right bus because you never want to get in a pinch where you're accidentally adjusting somebody's monitor mix when you think you're trying to adjust the front-of-house mix. It's a bad deal. And it trips up a lot of engineers. So you're not alone if you do that. Now there's one more way that we can get individual channels to these mixes. So if I went to an individual channel and let's say that in mix 1, they needed more snare top mic. I could select the snare top mic and go to the routing page and you can see here everywhere where that snare drum is sent. You can see that it's on to monitor 1. We want to make sure that that's there. And we can see the level. So we could tap the number there where it says level and adjust it here. That'll turn it up and down going to mix 1. If we want to verify, we can touch mix 1 here and see, yes, now this is at -4. If we move it around, we can see that that's happening there as well. This is also where you can change pre and post on the individual channel level. So if we want our snare drum to be post fader, because let's say when the drummer switches to brushes or the cross stick, everybody needs to hear it. So if you're pushing it up at front of house, they might also want to hear it in the monitors. This is a rare situation that I haven't actually run into, but it's a nice theory. We could set this to be post fader. So now if the snare drum gets pushed up at front of house, it also gets pushed up in people's in-ears. But I've only done this for that one monitor mix. Let's say the singer on 1 wants it to change, but the guitar player on 2 doesn't want it to change. I could keep this as post and have the other one as pre. We can also pan individual inputs here on the aux send. Because it's stereo, we can utilize that stereo image with our aux send. We would just select the pan slider here. I don't know what the pan arc. That's what you call it. And maybe for monitor 1, they want the tom over on the left side and they want tom 2 over on the right side. We can do that and now they've got some stereo imaging. More likely though, they're going to go to their guitars and one guitar on one side and the other guitar on another side. Now, one more place to trip you up is this on-off button, right? So if I select the snare and it's off going to this monitor send, it's not going to tell me by saying mute on the channel here. You don't get the visual representation of that when it's going there. So you might be like, I'm cranked the snare all the way up, but if it's not on to that monitor send, you're not going to get any signal. So make sure that you double check all these things that can trip you up. One more thing to remember is that the monitor send master is now over here on the master when we have this mix selected. So if I pull this down all the way, or if I have it muted, there's not going to be anything coming out of that monitor mix, no matter how many input channel faders I push up to it. If I go back to my left-right mix, you can see that the mute button has gone away. So it's not like when you switch here that this remains your left-right master for the main output. This is the master for whatever mix is selected over here. Now, if I was setting up a broadcast mix on this board to run from front of house, here's how I would do it. So I have 5 aux sends that I've set up to be the outputs for my broadcast mix. Whenever you're mixing broadcast, it needs a lot less dynamic range than when you're mixing front of house. So I set up these groups to take care of more of that dynamic range in little stages so that it's easier to get compressed and stay consistent for your broadcast output. So if I select the drums, I can see that I've got this aux send. If I go to processing, you can see that I have input channel processing on each one of these channels as well. So there's EQ, but what I'm mostly concerned about is the compression. Compression is going to help us tame the bits of this dynamic range before it gets to the broadcast matrix. Let me show you how to route it before we go any farther. I've got this aux send, but I want to send it to a matrix. So I'm going to go to routing, and on my matrix sends, if I touch here, now I can turn it up to matrix 1. If I set that level at 0 and I do the rest for all the rest of these, now all of them are going to be sent evenly to this matrix 1. So for our matrix, we've got it assigned to layer E. So we can select it and we can change its name. So what I want to do is go here and matrix 1. I want to enter the channel name of broadcast. But I ran out of letters. I think it's limited to 6. So we're going to call it stream. And that is how we do it. So now our stream, we want to make sure that we turn up the output here as well. And back on layer D, where we've got our different channels for the broadcast mix. We've got all of these, and now they're all assigned to the broadcast or the stream matrix. So they're post fader still. So if we go to routing, they're post fader. So if we make adjustments on the faders here, it will be sent differently. We will change the level going there, and it's going to be post-processing. There's no way to change the way that you include or disinclude processing going to the matrix. Now that we have the aux sends sent to the matrix, now we're going to send our input channels to the aux sends, and we're going to make sure that they're post-fader and post-all processing. So how are we going to do that? We're going to select this here, and on drums, we're going to hit the little gear wheel where it says aux send. We're going to make sure that they're post delay. We want to make sure that they're all on and they're all post fader. We could choose all off and just select what we want to go there just to make sure that nothing is sent there frivolously, unnecessarily. I don't know. Somebody buy me a thesaurus. So we're going to turn it all off and then just turn on the individual ones that we want to go to these groups. So we're going to do that for the drums. We're going to make sure that it's post delay, all post and all off for instruments. Post delay, all off and all post for vocals. We're going to have our speaking mics the same way, and our crowd mics, post delay, all off and all post. But actually the crowd mics, I think I'm going to have pre-fader. Because the crowd mics are not going to front of house, I'm just going to keep them pre-fader. But we have to have the crowd mics going through a group. Even though it's just one set of mics, they have to go through an aux send or a group before they can be sent to the matrix. So now for our drums, we're going to find out what we want to assign to that, but we're going to do it at the input channel layer. So I'm going to go up to layer A, select my drums, and I'm on the routing page still. And I'm going to go over here to drums. I'm going to turn it on, and I'm going to turn my level up. Now, it would be easier if I went over here to aux send 7 and went ahead and turned up the level on all of these. That way I don't have to turn a bunch of knobs. Go back to my main page again. And now for each one of these, I can turn them on. And now our drums are sent to that drum group. It's not technically a group, it's still an aux send, but I'm using it as a group for this purpose. Next, I'm going to go to my bass and I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to make sure that I'm on group 8 and send all my instruments at right around 0 at the same levels. Oops, not the drum pad. So I'm going to make sure that it's around 0, and then for each one of these, I'm going to make sure that they're on. Now going down to my vocals, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to make sure that we're on 9. So for our vocals, and we're going to turn all of those up. And for each one, we're going to turn it on. Now for our speaking mics, we're going to go to our pastor. We're going to turn that on. And if you had any handheld mics or anything like that, you would turn that on, and we're going to make sure that we're going to mix number 10. And our crowd mics, we're going to mix 11. We're going to turn those up. Find those on this layer and turn those on, and they're pre-fader. So we can get our level just right. And now we should be good to go on there. So now that we've routed everything, we've turned it all on, we've made sure that it's post-fader. As we play back our tracks, we should be seeing the drums going to the drum group, the instruments going to the instrument group, vocals going to the vocals group, and crowd mics All of that should be routed, and then we should see all of it show up on the matrix as well. So I'm going to hit play on my band in a box, and we're just going to see how things are going here. I'm going to go back to my left-right mix. I'm going to make sure that I have faders up because, again, these are all post-fader. If I had all my faders down, we wouldn't be seeing any signal. And let's give it a shot. See if we did it right. All right, I've got a lot of gain on those crowd mics. That was too much. Because I'm using recorded tracks, I don't need any preamp. They're already at line level. So that's why you were seeing some clipping there at first. Here we go. We've got signal on our different groups there. There's nothing coming into the speaking mic because I don't have a speaking mic going right now. And then if we go here to our stream, we have signal and our stream output. So we can PFL that. You can see that there's lots of signal there, good healthy signal. And we could listen to that on the headphones if we wanted. Now I could show you all the details of how I do the processing on all of these groups and buses, but that would take a really long time and you might need some help as you're getting dialed in on it. But I have that as a part of the broadcast audio course that's part of the Attaway Audio Academy membership. This online course is dedicated to helping you get a great broadcast mix, whether you're mixing it from your front of house board, separate digital audio workstation, or a separate console, and getting things dialed in so that you know exactly what to listen for and how to build it well from the ground up so that it sounds good when you're just mixing front of house. It translates really well online. We also have live Q&A every week, so if you get in a pinch, you've got somebody that can help you out and you can ask specific questions related to your setup. To sign up, follow the link down in the description below or go to attawayaudio.com/academy. Now, after we've got our aux sends set up, we also have to make sure that we send them somewhere. So we have to go to our I/O page to assign where that's going to come out as an analog output. So to do this for our monitors, let's go to our I/O page and we can see we've got our outputs and we want to go to our mix out tab. Now on the left side, we'll see all of our different monitor mixes, right? We can scroll down here. We can see monitor mix 1 through 6, left and right. And we can do it locally. So if we have say we have some wireless in-ear monitor transmitters and they're right beside our board, we can choose our output to come from here on the local tab, or on the S-Link, we can choose the outputs that are on our D-Snake. You can see them down here. We've got 1 through 8 there. That wouldn't be enough for all of our in-ear transmitters. So you have to keep that in mind when you're choosing where you set up the outputs for your in-ear monitor mixes. So if we wanted those to come out on channels 1 through 8, we would select this. We'd have to turn on the patch button to undo that. Hold this down. Now we can start going 1 through 8. And now 1 through 8 are patched there. So our first 4 monitor mixers are going to be showing up on the D-Snake down here. Of course, that would be on stage in a typical setup. If we wanted them to come out locally, we could choose the local outputs. And we can see here that the dark gray are 11 and 12. That's my main output. So I can see my main left and right are already patched to 11 and 12, and that's what's coming out of the board in the back. But then we would want to select, let's say, our last 2 monitor mixes. We would want to come out, say, 1 through 4 on here. So then we go to mix 5 left, hold that down, spin a little bit, and now those final monitor mixers have their output. Again, we would do the same thing for our monitor wedge. If we had enough outputs on our digital snake, we would do it there. Hey, if you liked this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and welcome to the club of sound ninjas. And as always, remember, it's all about the low end, avoid the sound tech solo, and nobody leaves church humming the kick drum. We'll see you back here next time on Attaway Audio.